Although Queen Soraya ended her marriage to the Shah of Iran back in 1958, their doomed love story didn't end there. It took an even more heartbreaking twist. Right from the start, their romance seemed destined for sorrow. Despite their separation, they reportedly never stopped loving each other. Years later, as the Shah's life neared its end, Soraya is said to have penned a deeply emotional letter. What came next was a tragedy no one could have predicted. Curious, let's dive into the story together. Soraya's life was one of privilege. She was the only child of Khalil Esfandiary-Bakhtiary, an Iranian nobleman, and Eva Karl, a German. Her childhood was steeped in luxury, split between Berlin and Isfahan while attending elite finishing schools. But beneath her polished exterior was a fiery personality. She was known for her bluntness, not hesitating to lash out if provoked. Still, her stunning beauty seemed to make people overlook her flaws, so much so that, in 1948, the Queen Mother of Iran, desperate to find a suitable bride for her son, Shah Mohammad Reza, decided Soraya was queen material based solely on a photograph. A fairy tale, right? Well, maybe not. Like many fairy tales, this one had its eerie undertones. The Queen Mother was so intrigued by Soraya that she sent her own daughter to meet the young woman and gauge her potential. When the Iranian royal family wanted something, they didn't waste time. Despite Soraya's modest educational credentials, they whisked her off to Tehran. In reality, it was a formal audition for the role of queen. One moment changed everything. When Shah Mohammad Reza walked into the room dressed in his impeccably sharp military uniform, Soraya was instantly captivated. She later described him as magnificent. The Shah, for his part, was equally taken with Soraya. He became infatuated and was ready to propose on the spot. For starters, Mohammad Reza was in his 30s, making him more than a decade older than Soraya. His family dynamic was equally troubling. His father had treated him harshly in an effort to toughen him up, while his mother was controlling and possessive. And then there was his romantic history, hardly a clean slate. Before meeting Soraya, he'd been married to the stunning Princess Fawzia of Egypt, a union that became synonymous with public scandal and heartbreak. Fawzia had suffered greatly in the Shah's toxic and tumultuous family, bearing him a daughter rather than the desired son. Despite all of this, Soraya accepted his proposal. To this day, there's lingering confusion about her age at the time. Official accounts claimed she was 18, but many believe she was as young as 16. Their wedding date was set for December 27, 1950, but fate intervened. Just before the ceremony, Soraya contracted typhoid and became gravely ill. The palace had no choice but to postpone the nuptials. However, what stood out during this difficult period was the Shah's surprising reaction. Though disappointed by the delay, he devoted himself to Soraya during her illness, making daily visits to her bedside. Every day, he left a jewel on her pillow as a token of his affection. It was a grand romantic gesture, but perhaps also a glimpse into the complexity of his nature, a man both devoted and deeply flawed. The Shah and his family were eager to speed things along with the wedding, so much so that they moved the date up by 6 weeks. Was it a case of overwhelming love, or was the Shah simply desperate for a male heir? Either way, it was far too rushed, and Soraya, still barely more than a child, paid the price. When the big day arrived, she was so frail that she could hardly stand. But did that stop the Shah? Not at all. Queen Soraya's wedding dress is now legendary, a masterpiece of fashion history. Designed by Christian Dior, it was a silver lame gown adorned with pearls and trimmed with marabou feathers. But what most people don't know is that Soraya was so ill on her wedding day, she had to wear a wool vest and socks under the dress to keep warm. The gown itself was a staggering 66 pounds, and the young, fragile bride could barely manage its weight. Things got so dire that, moments before the ceremony, the Shah had the train cut off to ensure she could make it down the aisle. Somehow, they pulled it off, and the couple appeared deeply in love. However, Soraya's fiery personality soon began to show. She could be sweet and charming when she wanted to, but if you crossed her, you were in trouble. At one public dinner, after an argument with the Shah, she shocked everyone by smashing a priceless vase against the wall. On another occasion, after a fight, she banned him from their bedroom, forcing him to sleep on a cot outside her door for weeks. These incidents caused plenty of gossip, but they weren't even the couple's biggest problem. While Soraya's temper flared, the Shah's reserved nature didn't help matters. His emotionally distant upbringing had left him stiff and awkward, even in private moments with his wife. The mounting tension and emotional strain led Soraya to rebel against the pressures of royal life. Although Queen Soraya is now remembered for her beauty and elegance, she wasn't exactly a model queen. Despite her love for the Shah, she quickly grew to resent the demands of royal life. She rejected many formal customs, refused to wear traditional attire, and avoided her duties. Unsurprisingly, this didn't sit well with the court. Already suspicious of her European heritage, they began to openly criticize her, mockingly calling her that German woman. And then, things got worse. In the 1950s, Soraya found herself at the center of a scandal that made international headlines. While visiting friends in America, she was photographed water skiing in Miami, wearing a revealing bikini. The conservative palace was outraged, and the photo was banned in Iran. This incident seemed to ignite further resentment within the royal family. The Shah's relatives, who had never warmed to Soraya, grew jealous of his devotion to her and began plotting against her. But Soraya wasn't innocent in all this. Her own jealousy issues were about to spiral out of control. Although Muhammad hadn't yet fathered the male heir he longed for, he did have a daughter, Princess Shahnaz, from his previous marriage. Soraya, feeling increasingly insecure, accused Shahnaz of monopolizing the Shah's affection, an accusation that mirrored what her in-laws had often hurled at her. Shahnaz, who was only 8 years younger than Soraya, became the target of her resentment. Soraya despised the girl's presence, convinced she was stealing too much of her husband's attention. However, her bitterness likely stemmed from a deeper fear, her own struggles to conceive. As queen, one of her primary responsibilities was to produce an heir, yet 3 years into their marriage, there was still no pregnancy. Concerned, the Shah urged Soraya to travel to America for a thorough medical evaluation. At first, the news seemed hopeful. Doctors in New York attributed her difficulty conceiving to the immense stress she'd endured in recent years, assuring her that there were no underlying fertility issues. But the couple couldn't shake their unease, so they sought a second opinion in Boston. This time, the results were devastating. Soraya was declared infertile, shattering their dreams of having a child together. The news was catastrophic for their already strained marriage. By 1954, their relationship was unraveling, with arguments becoming more frequent and intense as they grappled with their predicament. Then, in October of that year, tragedy struck again. The Shah's younger brother, Prince Ali, died in a plane crash at just 32 years old. The loss made the need for a male heir even more urgent, plunging the royal family into deeper turmoil. Desperate to change her fate, Soraya endured an exhausting series of medical tests and treatments in the hope of conceiving. After Prince Ali's death, her efforts intensified, but nothing worked. During this painful time, Soraya received no sympathy from her in-laws. Instead, they turned on her, spreading malicious gossip about her infertility. The Queen Mother and royal princesses, already envious of Soraya's position, used her struggles to further isolate her within the court. With no other options left, Soraya pinned her hopes on an unexpected source, her stepdaughter, Princess Shahnaz. Shahnaz had recently married Ardashir Zahedi, the wealthy son of a former prime minister. Soraya hoped that if Shahnaz could bear a male child, it might resolve the succession crisis. But this plan hit a major roadblock. The Shah despised Ardashir and declared that he would never accept a grandson from their union as his heir. Once again, the royal couple found themselves back at square one, faced with the grim reality of Soraya's infertility, the Shah proposed a controversial solution: taking a second wife. This wasn't an unusual practice within the Iranian royal family. His own father had multiple wives, but Soraya vehemently opposed the idea. Known for her jealousy and fiery temper, she couldn't even tolerate the Shah's interactions with his daughter, let alone the thought of sharing him with another woman. Determined to preserve her marriage and retain her position as his sole queen, Soraya made a bold plea. She urged her husband to amend the nation's constitution, arguing that one of his half-brothers should be allowed to inherit the throne instead. The Shah explained to Soraya that altering the constitution would require approval from the so-called Council of the Wise Men. However, this so-called council didn't actually exist. It was simply a way for him to avoid directly saying no. He wasn't willing to change the constitution, nor was he ready to give up his marriage. Around this time, Soraya's relationship with her mother-in-law took a sharp turn for the worse. The Queen Mother became an outspoken critic of Soraya and pushed her son to divorce her. By March 1958, the cracks in their marriage were beyond repair. Years of tension and failed attempts at reconciliation led to a final breaking point. On March 14, the Iranian government announced that the royal couple was officially divorcing, and Soraya would no longer hold the title of queen. But the story wasn't as simple as it seemed. While the announcement framed the divorce as a straightforward decision, Soraya claimed she had been blindsided. Living in Europe at the time, she alleged that just 9 days before the announcement, the Shah had called her, pleading for permission to take a second wife. He warned her that if she refused, he'd have no choice but to divorce her. The Shah's public reaction to the divorce was emotional and unguarded. During the official announcement, he openly wept, making it clear that the separation was deeply painful for him. For many, this seemed like the end of their complicated relationship. Soraya, stripped of her royal title, was expected to fade into a quiet, private life. But that's not what happened. As parting gifts, the Shah provided Soraya with a luxurious penthouse in Paris, a generous monthly allowance, a Rolls-Royce Phantom, and a stunning Bulgari ruby. On the surface, these appeared to be farewell presents, but they carried deeper intentions. Despite their divorce, Soraya and the Shah couldn't completely let go of each other. Rumors swirled that they met privately several times after their separation, and their connection remained far from over. But before their story could take another twist, Soraya had to endure an even more painful chapter. The Shah, desperate for an heir, wasted no time moving on. In 1959, just a year after their split, he married Farah Diba, a young and reportedly fertile woman, in a grand ceremony. The world eagerly watched to see if the new queen could succeed where Soraya had struggled. For Soraya, the outcome was devastating. Farah had no trouble fulfilling the Shah's desire for children. By October 1960, less than 2 years after their wedding, Farah gave birth to a healthy baby boy, Crown Prince Reza. The timing, almost exactly 9 months after the wedding, only deepened Soraya's heartbreak. Farah's ability to provide the Shah with an heir was a cruel reminder of what Soraya could not give him, and it cemented her place in the shadows of the royal family's legacy. After her tragic fall from grace as the Queen of Iran, Soraya embarked on a surprising second act as a Hollywood actress. Drawn to the allure of Tinseltown and armed with her striking beauty, she landed roles in iconic films such as The Three Faces. But as is often the case in Hollywood, fame came hand in hand with scandal. During the filming of The Three Faces, Soraya found herself entangled in a passionate affair with Franco Indovina, a charismatic Italian director. It seemed clear that Soraya was desperate to leave behind her royal past and lose herself in this fiery romance. After all, she deserved a fresh start, but there was a catch. Soraya had a tendency to dive headfirst into love. She even referred to him as the second great love of her life. The problem? Indovina was already married. Predictably, the affair ended in heartbreak, but not in the way anyone would have expected. In 1972, Soraya's life took another devastating turn. She received the gut-wrenching news that Indovina had tragically died in a plane crash. The loss shattered her. Overcome with grief, she withdrew from the public eye, her once promising film career grinding to a halt. She retreated to her penthouse in Paris, surrounding herself with high society, but vowing to live out her days quietly. Yet life had more twists in store for her. Even during her marriage to the Shah, Soraya had often lamented that he prioritized his crown over her. She had wistfully compared him to King Edward VIII, who famously gave up his throne for Wallis Simpson, his divorced lover. Ironically, Soraya came close to seeing her wish fulfilled years later. By 1979, Soraya was still grappling with the weight of her losses when another blow struck. She learned that her ex-husband, Shah Mohammad Reza, was dying of cancer and had only months to live. Despite their separation of over 2 decades, Soraya couldn't resist reaching out. In a deeply emotional letter, she revealed a secret she had carried for years. She had never stopped loving him. She even expressed her desire to see him one last time before his death, if he would allow it. Mohammad Reza's response was equally poignant. He admitted that he, too, still loved her and longed to say goodbye in person. To make it happen, he planned to meet her in secret in Cairo, away from his current wife. Tragically, the reunion never took place. The Shah passed away before they could arrange their final farewell, leaving their love story forever unresolved. Soraya's brief 7-year reign as queen was no less tumultuous than the rest of her life. While she struggled with the heartbreak of infertility, the Shah faced mounting political turmoil. Iran's prime minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, sought to strip the monarchy of certain powers, creating a tense standoff. When the Shah refused to comply, Mossadegh resigned, and chaos erupted among his supporters, some even calling for the Shah's assassination. As the Shah sank into despair, Soraya took a very different approach. She reportedly channeled her inner Lady Macbeth, growing frustrated with her husband's indecision. She urged him to take bold action and stage a coup against the government. When he refused, her response was cutting. She told him he disgusted her. In a later confession, she admitted she could no longer tolerate the man he had become. Soraya's life was a whirlwind of passion, heartbreak, and drama, marked by her relentless pursuit of love and her refusal to fade quietly into the background. Even in her darkest moments, she remained a figure of strength, a true queen in every sense of the word. Throughout her life, Soraya faced criticism from many Iranians who believed she harbored prejudice against their culture. The reality, however, turned out to be even more disheartening. Struggling with her nomadic upbringing, she seemed to gravitate toward Western. By 1980, Soraya had experienced love and loss 3 times, twice with the same man. After the Shah's death, she became a shadow of her former self, emotionally shattered. She spent her remaining years in the upscale Élysée neighborhood of Paris, maintaining a social circle of duchesses and celebrities while keeping a low profile. But when her life came to an end, it was far from the graceful exit one might expect. On October 26, 2001, Soraya was discovered lifeless in her Paris apartment. The cause of her death remains a mystery to this day, with no clear answers about the circumstances surrounding it. The silence surrounding her passing has left lingering questions, creating an air of unease. Just a week later, her younger brother Ban also passed away. Before his death, he reportedly mentioned that losing his sister left him feeling utterly alone. The close timing of these family tragedies has sparked suspicions of foul play, adding another layer of intrigue to an already mysterious story. Soraya's life, marked by love, loss, and exile, has drawn comparisons to the star-crossed lovers of Romeo and Juliet. Her tale continues to captivate, earning her the haunting moniker of the sad-eyed princess, a name that reflects the sorrow woven into her royal downfall.